Today we are reading The Last Tree by Emily Haworth-Booth. Let's have a look at the blurb. Once upon a time, a group of friends were looking for a place to live. They settled in an unspoilt forest where the light was dappled and the breeze was gentle. But before long, they started cutting down the trees to make fire and shelters and homes. They cut and cut until only one tree was left. Can the children save the last tree? A story of hope, rebellion, about our relationship with the environment and with each other. Once upon a time, a group of friends were looking for a place to live. The desert was too hot, the valley was too wet, and the mountain was too windy. Nowhere was quite right until they saw the first tree, and came to the forest where dappled light fell through the leaves and a gentle breeze twisted between the branches. All summer long the friends lived and played amongst the trees and slept on the mossy floor. When winter came, the breeze turned colder and they took a few branches for firewood. But where they had taken branches, the rain came through and put out their fires. They chopped down a few whole trees to build shelters, but that made the forest colder still. So they cut down some more trees to turn their shelters into cabins. Soon it seemed that the more wood they took, the more they needed to take. When the summer returned, the sun blazed down and there weren't enough trees left to shade them. Yet a few more branches made very pleasant porches. Before long, the people became skilled carpenters, and all summer they worked hard to make the perfect village. Porches for shade, ladders for climbing up to build porches, laundry poles, laundry pole ornaments, carpentry tables, chairs for sitting under porches, rulers for making things straight, wooden sculptures to look at. But when the autumn winds came through again, they whipped through the spaces where the trees used to be, throwing all the villagers' fine work into disarray. They needed a new plan, one that would solve all their problems forever. Let's tie everything down with a rope. That will never work. Well, we have to do something. We could catch the wind in big bottles. A barrier's the answer. We need more wood. So they cut down all the trees still standing. All, that is, except one last tree that was no good to anyone. What about that one? Oh, leave it. It's really more of a weed. And with the wood they built a wall. What fun they had working together to build it, and how proud they were when it was done. Stillness descended like a blanket. The clothes stayed put. The plants grew tall and straight. At last, the place really was just right. But with nothing to look at but the wall, something happened to the people too. In time, they started to forget their games and songs, and soon the happy village had grown cold and hard, for now the villagers had walls around their hearts. I saw the neighbours looking at me strangely yesterday. I think they're jealous of our cabbages. They were peeking through our window, I swear it. Perhaps we ought to reinforce the door. Fence in the garden, board up the windows. It had taken all the wood they had to build the wall. And so, before too long, each parent, thinking they were being clever, said the same thing to their child. Remember that last tree? The one more like a weed, tiny and weak. We need to stay inside and guard the house. So will you take this axe? Go out beyond the wall, see if it's still there, chop it down and bring us back the wood. Get it before the neighbours do. But when the children, creeping out beyond the wall, found each other by the little tree, they soon forgot their task. They laughed and ran and played and sang and tended the tree and gathered its seeds. Each day they visited, it grew a little taller and more proud, until they knew that they could never cut the last tree down. Meanwhile, each night the parents asked their children why they hadn't brought back wood. But when the children talked about the tree and how it made them feel, their parents wouldn't come outside to look, or even listen. That's when the children knew what they had to do. They started to bring home wood, but it wasn't from the last tree. And when it was delivered, plank by plank, their parents didn't question why it was so long and straight and smooth. All they said was, "This'll do just fine," and "Oh, that's good." They boarded and banged and fenced and reinforced and never once looked out or up. It was only when the wind rushed into the village, rattling their boarded-up windows and knocking down their new fences, that they ran outside and saw that despite all their new wood, the last tree still stood. In the bright daylight, they remembered that they were old friends, not enemies, and when they heard their children playing in the tree, saw how the cool wind twisted gently through its branches, and the sunshine fell in dappled shadows to the ground beneath, they were reminded of how things used to be. Then, all at once, they understood what they had done and how, perhaps, they could begin again. What fun they had taking down the wall, and how proud they were when it was done. As they planted the seeds and tended the saplings, they talked and sang, and as the children grew, a new forest grew with them. And the last tree became the first. You've been listening to The Last Tree by Emily Haworth-Booth.